is Fire Breathing Rob. Please like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube. We've had a lot of progressives on lately, and I love having this guy on because I actually voted for this man in 2018, and I believe he's a strong progressive and a great man. And this is Sean Shaw. So Sean was the former Florida State Rep in District 61, which includes Tampa, Ybor City, around that neck of the woods. And he also ran for Attorney General, was the Democratic nominee in 2018. So Sean, thanks again for coming on.
Sure.
I greatly appreciate this.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, man. How's it going?
Oh, it's going, well, it's going as good, I guess, as it can be right now.
Welcome to Florida.
Yeah, it is Florida. Well, we say Florida.
Yeah.
That's what I say. Anyway.
So does the rest of the country, man.
All right. Anyways, so let's kick this around. Firstly, so what got you into politics, Sean?
You know, I grew up in a household where, my father was on the Florida Supreme Court, and I always had kind of a notion that I wanted to give back to my community in a way. And watching my father certainly taught me how valuable public service was and what a noble calling it was. And so I went away to college in New Jersey, but I knew I was going to come back to Florida. And I went back to the University of Florida for law school, but I knew I wanted to give back to my community. And the way that I wanted to do it was in politics. And no, I didn't want to be a judge, as a lot of people always ask me, why didn't I want to be a judge like my dad? Well, I wanted to make the law. I wanted to write it as a legislator. I didn't want to just have to follow it as it was. I wanted to be at the front end and being able to change it. And so I always had a calling to give back in public service. And, I've always, I spoke with my dad. I was talking to somebody the other day. My dad was born in 1930. He became a member of the Florida Bar in 1960. And so you can imagine the types of struggles and things that he went through to achieve the pinnacle of success in his profession, what he was able to do to give back to his community. And growing up in a house like that, it's hard to not feel that you need to be giving back to your community as well. And growing up when I did and how I did, and with him as my father, I was afforded a lot of opportunities that he was not. I was able to go to the University of Florida for law school and Princeton University. My dad was simply not able to go to schools like that. He had to go to segregated schools. He went to West Virginia State for undergrad and Howard University for law school, and took the bar exam in segregated facilities. And so I certainly thought with the opportunities I was afforded, I needed to do something with them. And all that leads to kind of why I decided to get into politics.
Right. So let's get into this. You were a state rep. Can you talk about that? I mean, we see how, and I know you saw directly how the sausage gets made in Tallahassee, and some of it can be good, but a lot of it is pretty bad, to be honest with you. But what was your biggest accomplishment as a state rep?
Well, interestingly, you called me a progressive when you first introduced me, and I am, and I own that, and I'm proud of it. But I was able to pass and get signed into law 3 bills as a freshman Democrat. I was only in the House 1 term, and I was able to get 3 bills signed into law by Rick Scott. And I don't think anybody would accuse me of being a Dino or someone who was friendly with Rick Scott, but I was able to get those bills, and they were about affordable housing, and they were about consumer protection, which is kind of my background. And so I was very proud that we were able to get those bills passed in a Republican-dominated legislature and signed into law by Rick Scott. But Tallahassee is an awful place, man. I'm not going to mince words. Not much good comes out of Tallahassee. Tallahassee is where good ideas go to die. We need good people up in Tallahassee. We need more of them. But, it certainly played into my decision to run for Attorney General what Tallahassee was like in the minority party, in the extreme minority party. I was in the legislature when Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened.
Right.
And so those young people came up to the legislature, and they really asked us to do 2 things, which was ban assault rifles and keep guns out of schools. And guess what the legislature did? The exact opposite on both of those things. Right. And it was the most emotionally riveting experience I've ever had in politics. They literally survivors, children who had cowered under their desks, feet from where their classmates were murdered, came up to Tallahassee, visited us all in our offices. the vast majority of us were brought to tears by their courage and their experience to come to Tallahassee, and for us to kind of spit in their eye and do what we did with the Marshall program and guns in schools. And I just thought that was the most disappointing experience I had in the Florida House. I will tell you this story.
Sure.
You often don't get to be proud of being in the minority party, but I remember walking into the chamber for us to vote. There were kids and supporters on both sides that were clapping because almost every Democrat was going to go in there and vote the right way, and every Republican was going to go in there and vote a different way. And I tell you what, every time the door opened, you could hear applause and yelling, depending on who walked in and who walked out. If you're a Republican, you walked out, you got silence or boos, and if you were a Democrat, they cheered you, but it wasn't necessarily partisan. It was because of how we were going to vote on the Guardian Bill, as it was called at the time. So a lot of highs and lows up there, but it's politics, I think, is a wonderful way for you to give back, but we really need more good people involved, because Tallahassee is really a problem.
And I know you did bring up your dad with the Supreme Court, but before I get into that, because I think, and I want to talk about Amendment 4, and I think the Florida Supreme Court in last year's, 2 years ago, rather, this governor's race was a big race because, you know, two members of the, I think it was what, 2 or 3 members of the Supreme Court got nominated by the governor? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think a third one, the third one is the one that he just appointed. And, you know, the ones we lost were really the last vestiges of moderate to liberal justices on the court. There were no black people on the Florida Supreme Court for an extended period of time there, which I think is a total travesty in a state as diverse as Florida. And you're right, the judiciary is one of the branches of government that will long outlive the people that appoint them there. So this applies not only to DeSantis and Rick Scott, it applies to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the permanent damage he's doing to the federal judiciary, you don't see it. But 10, 20, 25 years from now, these young federal judges that he has appointed will either still be where they are, or they'll be elevated to higher appellate and possibly even the United States Supreme Court. And so these are, it's disconcerting. The Florida Supreme Court was one of the branches that was at least willing to stop the governmental overreach that the Republicans were trying to do. And now with that gone, you've seen what can happen. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better now that the Republicans are clearly in control of all branches of government in Florida. We'll see. We'll see.
Since you brought it up with the Supreme Court, we know that Amendment 4 passed overwhelmingly. Regardless, with that passing overwhelmingly, the Republicans, Governor DeSantis has, really been fighting it, putting in a poll tax. What do you feel like is going to happen with this? Do you think eventually it's just going to basically not mean anything? Because there's so many hoops to jump through, it's going to be extremely hard for anybody to really get their voting rights back.
Well, I know, and I want to give a shout out to my buddy Desmond Meade and the Florida Rights Restoration Council, who, Desmond is the figurehead, not just the figurehead for this, he is the driving force behind Amendment 4. So I want to give him credit to his team for passing this. But what you say is exactly correct. And right now it's in limbo. Right now, essentially, the law that the legislature passed to impose to say that you have to pay all fees and costs prior to being able to register to vote, that law is in effect right now. A lower federal court had stopped that law from applying for a little while, but the higher court essentially said that law's in place. And so that's the law of the land right now. I know at a minimum, some of us, including myself, and I know Desmond in a big way, are trying to raise funds to help pay for some of these fees and costs, trying to organize lawyers so they can help people get through this. But this is not how it was supposed to be. This is not what the people voted on. And, this is one of the reasons I ran for Attorney General, is we do this all the time. We vote for constitutional amendments. The people pass them. They go to Tallahassee. The legislature screws it up. And there's no entity that holds the legislature accountable for doing this. And the only office that could possibly do it is the Attorney General's office. And it's been so long since we have an Attorney General that was worth a damn here in Florida that was willing to do any of these things and willing to fight for the people. I don't think Floridians know what it could be. When I was running for Attorney General and I would explain what you could do, I could see people's mouths drop and eyes open wide the Attorney General's office is massively powerful and important as a force for good and a force for the people. You know, if the Attorney General was willing to go fight for Amendment 4, we'd be in a very different posture legally, I believe. We'd be in a very different posture with regard to public school funding, with regard to the environment, with regard to all these things we've passed constitutional amendments for. But if the legislature can do whatever they want to do and the people's lawyer isn't going to do anything about it, well, then you're stuck here where the people pass the amendments, the legislature either completely doesn't do it or waters it down so that it's almost ineffectual, and nothing can be done. And it's terribly frustrating. You know, one of the legislative things that upset me so much was the Florida Forever funding, which is, you know, the people passed this constitutional amendment whereby the dock stamp money, a certain percentage of it was going to go supposedly directly to purchase environmentally sensitive lands. Well, the legislature interpreted that to mean, well, no, we're going to pay state salaries, we're going to pay for government infrastructure. And so they ended up not buying land, but really paying state employees who they were already paying prior to the constitutional amendment passing. That kind of stuff you can't do if you had an attorney general who was really the people's lawyer here in Florida. And I'll tell you, that was one of the main reasons that I was driven to run, because people, it's really all the effort that went into Amendment 4, all the blood, sweat, and tears. I know how much work went into passing Amendment 4, and to see it thwarted by the legislature and then by the courts because of what the legislature did is heartbreaking. And we don't have anybody to do anything about it because the governor is in on it, the attorney general is in on it. What are you going to do?
Well, Sean, not only that, now if they want to put petitions on the ballot, they're making it extremely hard. I know we have $15 minimum wage on the ballot, and I hope that passes in Florida. At least it's a start in the right direction. I know it's going to take a long time to get to $15 with the measure, but at least it's something. But they make it extremely hard for these ballot amendments to get on that ballot. So,
well, they're going to make it harder because they don't like the fact that the people are doing these things directly and going around the legislature. So the legislature's response to this is to make it harder to get the petition signed and make it harder to be able to pay people to get the signature, just make it hard as possible to amend the Constitution because they don't like the fact that you, the people, can go around them and put stuff directly on the Constitution. It is, like I told you, man, Tallahassee is a tough, tough place to be a Democrat. We just got to be up there, and you got to keep electing people. And as you said at the beginning, we got to flip one of these chambers so that we can at least stop some bad things. But I mean, listen to the sequence of events. The people pass Amendment 4. The legislature passes a law to essentially stop it. The legislature then passes a law so that you can barely put things on the ballot to begin with, period. That's what we're doing here in Florida. And man, I hope the people understand kind of what's going on in this state and how the voice that they can exercise by the ballot initiative process is really on the verge of getting silenced.
So let's talk about 2018. We kind of dived into it a little bit with Amendment 4, but it was a big year for Democrats. They took over the House of Representatives as far as the federal government by a huge majority. But we saw Florida Democrats lost Bill Nelson with the U.S. Senate race, obviously Andrew Gillum, your race, in the CFO race. And that was extremely hard because, as you said, there was the Supreme Court seats were on the line in that election, Amendment 4, what we could have did with that, etc. Why do you believe this happened? Do you feel like it was something to do, you know, we saw Donald Trump throughout the 2018 elections. He went after Andrew Gillum. And there was a lot of dog whistling about race in that, even by Ron DeSantis, monkeying it up.
Right.
And for him as African-American, such in yourself also, feel like that was a reason why a lot of people maybe didn't vote because of that? Donald Trump.
I will tell you, I mean, I certainly heard stories of people who were reviewing ballots after the election.
Sure.
And the ballot would be a vote for Bill Nelson, Andrew Gillum blank, Sean Shaw blank, a vote for Jeremy Ring, and a vote for Nikki Fried. Now, you tell me what the two blank ballots.
Wow, that's really bad. So that's a
you
Democrat.
Tell me what the blank ones have in common. But I will tell you it was a factor. I don't think it was necessarily the factor.
Yeah.
I think people have got to understand Florida is more than Miami, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Tallahassee, right? Florida has got some funky, super red counties. And so we have these 7 or 8 counties in Florida where Democrats are just crushing it. Broward, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Duval to an extent, Hillsborough, Pinellas, Orange, and Leon. And the fact that I can name them all to tell you that we need to do better. But other than those counties, the problem is we're not able to do well enough in those counties to counterbalance the Sumter counties and the Hardy counties and the Collier counties and the Santa Rosa counties and the Wakulla counties and Baker counties and all these other counties that, you know, Democrats don't really even pay attention to. But the rest of the state, other than those big city enclaves, the rest of the state is very red. And the people that move to Florida, we love the fact that Florida has always got new people moving in. It's great for our tax base, great for the economy. But who is actually moving into Florida? And I think when you look at the numbers, you start to realize it is older people escaping high taxes. Now, I'll let you guess what party they're a member of. So, I mean, the villages, every day, new Republicans fleeing taxes are moving into Sumter County and moving into the villages. And so we've got to understand we have to do a better job as Democrats, and this is just Sean talking, of speaking to some people that we can draw from in the middle or even their side. I think one of the very damaging things that they were able to put on Andrew is that all his plans were going to require monumental tax increases. Yeah. And I think that was a bigger factor possibly than race. Once they were able to tag him with that, that's a problem. And of course, it wasn't necessarily true, and Andrew did his best to beat it off. But when you start talking about taxes, that triggers something in all those red counties that people do not want their taxes to go up. Florida is one of the lowest tax states in the country. You can say that's a good or a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing because we can't afford to pay for the rest of our infrastructure. But we've got to start talking to NPAs and even some Republicans that are persuadable. We've got to talk to them about issues that we can agree on, because I think we're not going to be able to do it just by flexing in Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and these other counties. We've got to get some other people on board, which is possible, which is very possible. For example, the public school system in this state is deplorable. It is not where it needs to be. That's an issue that you can find some common ground with, I think, with people, NPAs and people on the other side, that we need to do a better job just clearly of funding our public school system here in Florida. I mean, that just is what it is. Almost every benchmark study and data shows that Florida is near the bottom. DeSantis gave a little raise to teachers and gave some money here recently, but we're not where we need to be. The environment, Florida and Floridians, particularly native Floridians, have a love of Florida's water and the Everglades and the beaches and the trails, and and the springs, and we're doing a mighty bad job of maintaining that and protecting it. That's an issue I think that we might be able to get to on the other side. But the race in 2018 was very partisan because of who was in the White House. It's hard to talk to other people on the other side when you've got kids being locked up in cages in Homestead, Florida, and when you've got Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happening, when you've got these things and you've got the president talking like he's talking, it's very hard for me to get on the stage and reach out to the other side, because quite frankly, I'm so pissed off at what the president said in the morning that I'm breathing fire by that time when I get on stage. So I think Democrats, we're gonna, and it doesn't take much. I'm talking about 1%. 1 or 2% more of outreach for us to get some of them to us, I think, is something that would be very beneficial, some of these statewide elections. And I know it's early and there's a lot of ifs, but if DeSantis is as vulnerable then as he is now, and if people remember how bad he's messing up this coronavirus response, and if the president happens to lose, I think the governor's race is ripe for the picking for Democrats. But that's a 1 or 2% race again. Welcome to Florida. So we've got to figure out a way, I think, to speak to some even Republicans and say, look at the coronavirus response, look at our environment, look at the public school system. Why don't you give Democrats a chance? Because Republicans have been in charge 20, 25 years in this state. everything that's going wrong is on them. We haven't been in charge. You can't blame it on Democrats in Florida. Republicans have had almost total control for 20, 25 years. So every bad thing going on, they need to own it.
I give Andrew a lot of credit because you were talking about going to these red counties, and I remember he did many campaign stops, and I used to watch the rallies. I'm a political nerd. When he would go to all these, and he finished his campaign in the Panhandle. I remember before Election Day. So, and I know he was traveling all over the state.
Listen, I went to Sumter County myself, and it was standing room only for me.
Right.
And I know Andrew had gone there before because he told that story on the road. He'd gone to Sumter County and didn't know that there were that many Democrats. Neither did I. There were 900 people packed into that room to listen to little old me talk about my attorney general race, and it was amazing. I mean, we went to those places. But again, I mean, when you're looking at the returns on Election Day, man, you start seeing the returns from Collier County and Santa Rosa County and Sumter County, where's the villages. And we can't afford to lose by those huge margins in those counties. We just can't. We've got to close those margins even slightly. You ain't gonna win Sumter County, but you got to close the margins slightly, and that's how we're gonna win these statewide elections.
Sean Shaw here on Fire Breathing Rob. For the most part, Floridians that are in elected office, such as our governor, are not really stepping up to the plate, and we know Donald Trump isn't stepping up to the plate. Period. Well,
I mean, we're living in a really fascinating time that political nerds like you and I are going to look back on in 20 years and tell our kids and grandkids how ridiculous it was that we elected a clown like Donald Trump to be president, and how he conducted himself, not only through the Russia and the impeachment, but through these protests and Corona and COVID-19 situation. And politicians are good at one thing, man, trying to get reelected. And so DeSantis is doing what he thinks his base wants, which is to blame the press for bad coverage, which is to blame more testing for the higher rates of COVID-19, which is to play the victim and say that everyone's against him, but that Florida's doing just fine, to bury his head in the sand and say that everything's fine here in Florida and we're about to get over it, and then to get in a partisan fight with Cuomo about whatever the hell. I mean, he's playing right out of the Trump playbook, and that's how he got elected. You're a political nerd, so you probably were as fascinated as I was that the minute Trump endorsed him, the numbers between him and Putnam switched almost 25 to 30 points in less than a week in that primary. I mean, it was amazing to see how quickly the numbers changed, and DeSantis won the Republican nomination because of it. So he owes his governorship to Trump, and he's damn sure paying it back. And so everything's a conspiracy, not a big deal. We're going to school, let the kids teach. Mexicans are the reason that coronavirus cases are going up here in I-4. What else has he said? It's outrageous. But if you saw, the thing that was most offensive to me was when he got in the fight with Cuomo and he said, well, Florida's not going to do what New York did because we know what we're doing. And he opened the state back up, didn't close the beaches, and opened the state back up pretty early, and the numbers didn't immediately skyrocket. He went before the media and demanded an apology from everyone and said, you should apologize to me because I did it right. Florida did it right. Our numbers aren't rising. Look what New York did, and they're gross. And here we are at the end of July, and we're the worst state in the country in terms of COVID-19. My friends won't even come to Florida to visit me because their wives won't let them come to Florida, and as they shouldn't. We are now the laughing stock because we didn't do what we should have done, and here we are now, and the governor looks like a clown. He can't even put a mask on. He demanded an apology from the press, which now looks ridiculous in retrospect because we're the worst state in the country. But again, it's the press's fault. I've never seen people play the victim like this iteration of the Republican Party. I was on a talk show with some lady who was like, black people for Trump. I guess there's 5 of them. But she was one of them. And every word out of her mouth was how the press was treating the president so unfairly, and it was a conspiracy against him, and woe is me. And it took all the restraint I had in my 40 years of trying to be mature to be like, what in the hell are you talking about? Like, you got to own this. you got to own that you have done this. Trump is the Frankenstein monster that the Republicans created. And I don't feel a bit sorry for him that he's hopefully tearing their parties to shreds. They created them with their kind of nativism and veiled racism and veiled sexism and loving of the 1%. And listen, you created him and you got to own that. But DeSantis obviously has not responded well to this. And I'll tell you another thing. Rick Scott and I aren't friends. I never visited the governor's mansion when he was the governor because that's how much I had a distaste for him. But damn it, when he was the governor during hurricanes, at least I believed that he was in charge and he knew what he was doing. And at least I had confidence that he was making decisions that were going to keep Floridians safe and that I could believe at least what he was saying, none of which apply to DeSantis. So this is not necessarily even partisan criticism. I believed in Scott when he was the leader during hurricanes. I have no faith in DeSantis and his leadership during this crisis. And so I think in 2 years, he's going to have a price to pay.
What would you do to fix the unemployment system, and why did it get so bad?
Well, you know, I mentioned this earlier. So Florida is the least taxed state in the country, or at least one of them. Yeah. And so, fine, if you want to say that's a good thing, fine. You got one hand for Florida being low taxes. But there's a price to pay for those low taxes. And the price to pay for those low taxes is the complete underfunding of all our government infrastructure and other things such as Medicaid, healthcare, corrections, juvenile justice, unemployment. All Florida government is underfunded across the board. If you visit a prison, if you have to interact with DCF on there's not enough investigators. There's not enough prison guards per prisoner. Every area of state government in Florida is underfunded, and it's because we are the lowest tax state in the country. So there is a price to pay for being that low tax state. So Republicans can get up behind lecterns and give these wonderful speeches about how low the taxes are in Florida, but they need to own the inadequacies of the other systems. And one of those systems is the unemployment computer system, which, you know, Governor Rick Scott slashed Florida government, not only funding for infrastructure, but funding for people. And so there was a time, and I think this still may exist, that we are either the lowest or near the lowest in terms of per capita employees of state government, which means we were one of the smallest state governments per capita in the country. And that was their goal, that they don't like government, so they want to slash it. Where guess what? That means your unemployment check takes longer to get to you. That means there's not enough people at ACA to check on fraud of Medicaid. There's all sorts of consequences for not adequately funding government. And we've been on this trip for the last, 15 years with Jeb all the way now to DeSantis of slashing government, taking credit for all these wonderful cuts they're making in government. Well, guess what? Those cuts have consequences. And if you don't want to pay the money to have the computer system work for unemployment, guess what? You have a pandemic where a whole bunch of people need to access it. The computer system is a complete joke. It's antiquated. It can't handle anything. That's on you, governor, legislature. That's on y'all. And so what you need is adequate funding, but that means that you got to collect some taxes. You can't have a 0% corporate income tax. You can't. Every year when I was in the legislature, I voted against every tax cut that came across my desk. Every single one. And sometimes I was in the extreme minority. Like I'm talking about 1 or 5 people voting no. Like I voted against tax cut holidays, man. That it didn't make me very popular. But the reason I voted against it was on principle. We simply can't afford any more tax cuts. I don't care what the reason is for. All these are good reasons. The back to school tax cut, or the sun came up tax cut, or like it's a really nice day tomorrow tax cut. These are all wonderful things. We can't afford them. Every tax cut costs money. And if you want teachers to get salary, and if you want public schools to not be crumbling around, if you want health care to people, you can't keep cutting taxes. So I literally voted against every tax cut that came across my desk for that reason. I didn't think we could afford it. Like I said, it didn't make me popular at the time because I was voting against some things that sounded really nice, but I just didn't think we could afford them as a state because of where we are. We've been slashing everything for the last 15 years. And what you bring up is a textbook example. no one would have known how crappy the unemployment system was. But for now, everyone needs to access it. And now everybody's like, well, what happened? It's the same thing that's happened across state government. We just don't know how bad it is. It's bad.
What progressive politicians in the state of Florida do you see as up and comers? I know I talked about Anna Eskamani, who I'm friendly with, and I think she's great. But besides her, do you see any other up and comers in the state?
Oh yeah, I mean you've named Senator Pizzo.
Right.
I'm a big fan of Dottie Joseph in South Florida. I mean Fentress Driscoll here in the Tampa Bay area is a great example. Ben Diamond is my best friend. He's the incoming Democratic House Caucus leader. He's the state rep over in Pinellas. He had his kickoff yesterday that I helped him with. Dan Daly, who actually just called on my phone for something. I mean, we've got some progressive up-and-comers. The problem is they're outnumbered, 80 to 40. And it's hard to do anything when you're outnumbered 80 Republicans to 40 Democrats, no matter how many superstars they have in that 40. Now, the Senate is another deal. The Senate is a place where you can actually exert a little influence and power because there's only 40. And so Senator Gary Farmer, who's the leader of the Democratic caucus, is a personal friend of mine. Perry Thurston and people like that are in there fighting the good fight. But I'm convinced that we need one of these statewide offices because they're so important, not only for the power of the office itself, but the pipeline it represents for young Democratic staffers and people that work for government. And, I'm from the Alex Sink Mafia is what we like to say. There's a lot of us that worked for Alex Sink when she was the CFO. I did, and Ben Diamond did, and there's a bunch of now lobbyists and comms people. Like when you work for one of these offices, you then get the experience, and then, there's suddenly a Democratic bench. All these people that worked for Jeb for 8 years, they're running the state of Florida now. Because Jeb for 8 years had this pipeline of young Republicans who are now doing everything. And I'm convinced that you got to get one of these statewide offices like Nikki Fried has so that you can start having a bench and having a place for young superstar people that may not want to run for office, but you might have a great comms person. You might have a great policy person. You might have a great general counsel who 15, 20 years from now is going to be running the head of something. But here in Florida, we've been out of power so long. It's, most of the Democratic talent leaves because there's other things, better places to do and better jobs in DC and so on. And so those people that I listed are people that I'm fans of. And not only am I fans of them, I help them financially because you can't just say that you like progressive politicians and you hope they get elected. You got to do something about it. And usually we can walk and knock doors for them. But here in nasty Florida where everybody got coronavirus because of DeSantis, you got to send them some money. And so that's what I've been trying to do.
What advice would you give to young people such as myself that may want to get into politics, that are may want to run for office one day in general?
Work on a campaign would be the greatest advice I would give you because it teaches you so much about what actually goes into it. Everyone sees the out-facing when you have a suit on and you're behind a podium giving a speech, right? Well, it's a lot of not so great stuff has to take place for you to get there, which is a lot of fundraising, a lot of, working hard, grassroots, a lot of getting to know people, a lot of talking to people that you hate their guts and they hate yours, but you still got to do it because you're trying to get their vote and their support. So I would certainly work on someone's campaign. And I tell people this all the time, focus on what you really want to run for, not for the office that's open. A lot of people make the mistake of they just look for the first thing that's open and boom, I'm running for city council, I'm running for school board. Like I always had interest in the legislative seats in Tallahassee. And so I didn't run for county commission. I didn't run for city council. I didn't run for school board. I didn't run for mayor. I ran for the one I really wanted because running for office is so hard anyway. Damn if I'm going to be working this hard for something I really don't want and that I'm doing it just to get my foot in the door. Run for the one you want and you'll really be happy you did that. And it might mean that you got to wait 3 or 4 years. Guess what? You get to spend that 3 or 4 years developing a network and developing a fundraising base and getting on boards and doing work in your community so that when you run for office, you've got a resume and people look at you like, man, he's really been preparing to be a school board member. That's the advice. Work on a campaign and run for the one you really want.
So lastly, Sean, let's talk about the radio show. Did you always have a love for radio, and what made you want to start this radio show?
Not, you know, what's funny, not really. After my campaign for Attorney General, you know, obviously I needed a little break because I'd been running for office.
I remember when you conceded, you said something about going fishing.
Well, I did a lot of it. Don't worry. I did a lot of, I have done that. I've kept that promise. I bought a boat right after the election. I bought a boat that I go out in the Tampa Bay in. So I did a lot of fishing. I needed a break from fundraising. And I was telling people, like, the higher you get in politics, the less control you have over your life. And so other people had my calendar. Other people had my credit cards. Like, my entire life was someone else. And so it was nice to kind of get back to me making the decisions of what I did and when I did it. And so I needed that break, but I'm back in it now. And the radio show is something I started with my law firm. They're the sponsor, but it's great. I get to talk about local issues. I spend a lot about time talking about kind of statewide issues, though, because it's a local AM radio station. So a lot of the other hosts talk about local politics. So I try to talk about state level things and peel back the curtain a little bit so people understand kind of what goes on behind the scenes, so to speak, and people really like it and they respond to it. And I moderated the Hillsborough County NAACP debate a couple of nights ago, and so doing things like that. I've got my C4 People Over Profits. We're doing things, and so I'm involved in a lot of things. And you know, I tell people that I probably got one more big race in me. I don't know when and I don't know where, but I'm going to take my own advice and I'm going to run for the one I want. And so when the one I want presents itself, I will take a shot. But for now, I'm happy trying to make sure Biden is the next president. I was a Mayor Pete guy when it first all unveiled itself, but I'm all Biden right now. I'm a delegate to the convention on behalf of Biden, and that's the most important thing going on right now. And but after Biden gets elected, we'll see what's going on. But I'm quite content being able to fish and do Zoom meetings and all these wonderful things. But I'm like you. I'm very disappointed in our state, but I am hopeful. At a certain point, we're going to pull one of these off. And Andrew and Bill Nelson were so close. We're going to pull one of these gubernatorial races off. And man, you get a Democratic governor in there. I don't care how shitty the legislature is, pardon my language, because they are. You get a Democratic governor, some things change in terms of who the secretaries of these entities are and where the money goes and what lobbyists have to do, and it's a game changer, and we're going to get one of those pretty soon here.
So the radio show is on Saturday, right?
Saturday at noon, right?
And what's the station, just in case people want to listen?
I think it's 11:50 a.m. WT. It's WTNP. It's on my Facebook page. I live stream it. All the shows are saved on my personal Facebook page, so I Facebook Live it at the time, and it's a call-in show, and so people. It's Pinellas and Hillsborough County, so we get people listening to it. It's supposedly the top-rated show in that time slot, so that's cool. The time slot does interfere with my Saturday fishing, but we all got to make sacrifices, man.
No, I hear you, Sean. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the program, and I do agree with you. I hope that, and it was great to see. I know Andrew made a Facebook Live, not a Facebook Live, Instagram. And I'm grateful that he's doing well now, thankfully, with that. And hopefully he runs for something again. And I hope you definitely, I know you said you are. So I'm grateful to hear that, too, because you are really impressive.
Listen, man, it's only so much fishing I can do. And we're rapidly approaching that place because I do a lot of fishing. So we're getting there. So once I start getting bored and antsy, you all will know. But, man, I appreciate you having me on, and good luck in anything you do, bud. I appreciate this.
I appreciate it. Let's do this again down the road, Sean. I really appreciate it.
I'd love